Hello, everyone. This is Dorie Clark, and we're here with our weekly Newsweek interview show, Better. And our guest this week is Scott Barry Kaufman. He is a psychologist. He's the author of numerous books, including Transcend, and he's an expert in the study of self-actualization. We're going to be diving into that and some of his great insights. Scott, welcome.
Oh, thank you so much, Dory. It's just such a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. It's so great to have you here. All right. So I want to start out in a non traditional place
Mhm.
because Valentine's Day is coming up, Scott. You may have heard this rumor. And you wrote a book a while back called Mating Intelligence Unleashed. I love this. The role of the mind in sex, dating, and love. You have done so many things. This is just one of them. But for all of those people who are looking to celebrate Valentine's Day, they want to get it right. What's the most important thing that we need to know about the mind in sex, dating, and love?
Oh wow, I really love that. No one's brought up that book, in a good long time, if ever. You may be the first one to ever bring up that book in the history of my interviews. But yeah, for Valentine's Day, I would say that one of the biggest findings we have seen over and over again is that creativity is really sexy, and we underestimate the extent to which we can attract whoever we're trying to attract through our creative and sincere efforts at showing our interest in someone in a non-creepy way, but not like blasting music outside their door in 1980s style.
Are you telling me that Lloyd Dobler does not
There you go.
qualify under
There you
your
go.
criteria? This is so
Well,
disappointing, Scott.
no, that can backfire actually, but I'm talking about genuine displays of creativity. And we also, dare I say, talk about how intelligence can be sexy as well, and using being clever and using humor. And Yeah, that book was all about the role of the mind in sex, dating, and love. A topic we saw not discussed as much in these kind of attract someone books, which are like, wear makeup or wear the right. No, there's actually like something deeper here, that can be very sexy. Yeah,
I love it.
personality. Yeah,
I'm all about personality being sexy.
thank
Not,
you.
not to belabor it too much, because mostly we're going to be talking about our professional lives. But I'm curious, do you have any good examples of creativity vis-a-vis Valentine's Day, or how in general one can be showing one's affection to a new or old love interest?
Well, I would say that one of the sexiest personality traits is called openness to experiences. And if you can show in some way that maybe your partner or your wannabe partner is interested in something that is totally different from what you're interested in, and you just jump into that openness deep end lake and like sign up for like tickets for both of you too, or to try it, or something. Just like signal your openness in some way. Does that make sense?
It does. That's fantastic. This is Dorie Clark, and we're here with our weekly Newsweek interview show, Better. Our guest this week is Dr. Scott Barry Kaufman. He's the author of the book Transcend and many more. And we want to welcome some of our great friends tuning in from around the world who are joining us. Katie is joining us from New York, New Jersey. We've got Renee from Costa Rica. We have a LinkedIn friend from Miami. Ken is in Atlanta. Andrea is in Boston. Patricia is also in Boston. You two should
Wow.
connect. We have a LinkedIn friend from New Jersey. Peter's back from Edinburgh. Luis is in Argentina. Beth is back from London. We've got James from Chicago. Kathy's in St. Louis. Claire's in Dublin, and more. We love having every single one of you. And type your questions for Dr. Scott Barry Kaufman into the chat box. Now, Scott, one of the big themes that you are spending a lot of time thinking about and studying now is self actualization. This
Hmm.
is something that, for those of us who took intro psychology courses, we know that Abraham Maslow talked about the hierarchy of needs. Something that you have written that I thought was especially interesting is that the pyramid that we're familiar with. I mean, just as nutritionists seem to have banished the food pyramid, you are saying no, the Maslow pyramid is a little bit misleading as well. You prefer a different metaphor that you think is a lot more apt. Can you explain to us what that is and how it applies?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, just want to start off with a shout out to Cheryl K. Johnson, who wrote something very sweet in the notes about my work. So I just want to say thank you, Cheryl K. Johnson. Yeah, so I changed a metaphor of the pyramid well, I don't know if the pyramid's a metaphor for anything good, really. I don't know what it is a metaphor for. It's for for on their way to the top, climbing on the way to the top and stepping over people. Maybe that's what that metaphor is. But I just didn't like that kind of. I'm not a big fan of hierarchies. I'll be honest. I'm not a big fan of some way of thinking like, oh, in order to self-actualize, like I need to meet all these steps in the precise order, like before I can even begin to be motivated or move towards my what I really want in life. No, we can work on things simultaneously. So I came up with this idea of the sailboat as a better metaphor for a self-actualizing life, because really life is about integrating all these different parts of ourselves. Or if a boat wants to move harmoniously through the ocean, the vast unknown of the sea, to really take this metaphor, since life is so unpredictable. Um, we really need to have an operating boat, or operating vessel that feels safe and secure, feels like there's not a lot of holes that are in the boat, so there's a lot of water coming in. And the analogy there to human life would be lack of food, shelter, water. Water. Well, yeah, water. Sure, sure. Lack of basic needs, lack of connection. If you feel profoundly lonely, it's hard to motivate yourself to compose that new symphony. Um, Lack of respect, self-esteem. Those things can really make you feel like you're not on a solid boat. But eventually, if you want to self-actualize, you really do need to open up that sail and move in the direction of whatever port you're really moving in, and having really great clarity on what that port is, and uh, and really and really going for your dream. Yeah.
That's fantastic. Thank you. I'm Dorie Clark. This is our weekly Newsweek show, Better. We're here with Dr. Scott Barry Kaufman. If you want to learn more about Scott and his work, you can check it out. His website is scottbarrykaufman.com. And if you want to make sure that you never miss an episode and learn more about the great things we're doing here at Better, you can go to my website. It's dorieclark.com. Sign up, get a free self-assessment, and you can join the email list so that you can make sure you never miss one of our regular episodes. So, Scott, something that I'm always interested in. Now, this was something that I grooved on for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
You are the founder and director of the Center for Human Potential. Now, most famously, the human potential movement, as most people
Yeah.
know it, is a thing that people think of as being like from the 70s and groovy people. And it's something that we've sort of culturally not talked about very much in recent years. You are working to bring it back. So talk to us about
Yeah.
your choice of words and what you are working to accomplish with that.
Thank you, Dorie. You're really such an exemplar conversational partner, I should say. It's really wonderful, and refreshing. Yeah, I really am trying to not only bring back a human potential movement, but put it on a firm scientific foundation. So I want a modern day human potential movement to be grounded in evidence based. There are a lot of people that have workshops in human potential, and they're just like coming from like the grandiose narcissism of the leader, of the cult leader. You know what I mean? There's a lot of cults out there that talk about human potential. um we will help you with your human potential. You're like, well, calm down. So cults are very intense. um
That is for
we
sure.
take a little bit more of a chill approach over at the Center for Human Potential, and a little bit we try to have a little bit of humility, and in that we're constantly learning. It's a community for nerds and people who want to learn. I teach an 8-week course called the Transcend course. We actually have our cohort going right now, and we try to teach the latest science of human potential, and we try to cultivate a community. We call them the community of transcenders, because that's what Abraham Maslow called them, transcenders, were those who are motivated by transcendence and transcendent states of consciousness, and wanting to be better people, wanting to have greater synergy with their environment, and to realize their calling. So graduates of our program are called transcenders, and I'm creating a self-actualization coaching program that's in those lines of teaching the latest science of human potential to advanced coaches. And then I want to go in and teach it to teachers, so that teachers become self-actualization coaches and start thinking of themselves as such. And then managers, we want to teach managers, and then healthcare professionals. That's our business plan.
I love that. That sounds like a great business plan. We
Thank
want to
you.
say hi to some of our great friends tuning in from around the world. We're here speaking with Dr. Scott Barry Kaufman. We have Paulina joining from Cleveland. Leandro is back from Brazil. Amin's in Iran. Mohammed's in India. Maggie's in Oregon. Marie's in Alexandria, Virginia. We have Margarita from New York. We've got Salisu from Niger. Tonmoy is in Dubai. We have a LinkedIn friend from
Wow.
Amsterdam. And Zeke is in San Benito, Texas. Welcome to all of you.
That is so cool. How do I see all these people like that you're seeing? Is it on LinkedIn?
It's coming through on LinkedIn. I'm not
Hmm.
100% sure on the user on the guest side of all of this, but for me, it's coming up in the comments section under live. So
Wow.
yeah, so many people tuning in. We're so glad you're here. And type your questions for Dr. Scott Barry Kaufman into the chat box. We want to hear what's on your mind. But Scott, before we get to our amazing audience questions, something
Yeah.
that's on my mind is you wrote a book, one of 10, I believe, that you've done. It's called Wired to Create. Discover the 10 things great artists, writers, and innovators do differently. Now,
Yeah.
this is good. Fortunately, this is not a pop quiz, so I don't expect all 10, but can you tell us one or two things that great artists and writers do differently as you have studied the art of creativity?
Sure. One thing we find is that creators are really good at harnessing paradoxes within themselves. And I think this is really an underappreciated, undervalued aspect of creativity. There are certain like correlations that like you tend to find that introverts don't on average like dancing, on tables at parties, or you find on average, people who there's just so many things you can say are like, well, this tends to be correlated with this, tends to be what you find with creative people is that they break the correlational structure within themselves. So they could be introverted, profoundly introverted, but they can also know when to completely let loose, and relax and party. And they can be extremely, extremely sensitive to the world around them, but they can also be very, very tough minded and determined to get what they want. You can just go through the line and you see that creative people are so good and not only are they good, they accept it. They're like, yeah, I contain multitudes. Yeah, I can contain multitudes. No, am I allowed to curse? I don't know, but yeah. So, beep, 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 beep. But yeah, creative people are just so good at harnessing the seeming paradoxes that other people are so scared to touch. Like everyone's like, oh, you have to be in this box or this box. You have to be this or this, male, female, liberal, conservative. I mean, I can go down the list of all these like things that we treat as dichotomies, but that's another one about creative people is they tend to be more on the androgynous side of gender. I always found that one so interesting. I wrote a whole article about that for Scientific American.
Wow, that is super interesting.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. Okay,
Amazing.
so do you want me to? Okay, so that's one. The paradoxes. Should I think of something else?
Let's give us one more, Scott,
Should I go?
just to
Should I
whet
add
their
to
appetite.
this? Should I add to this? Um, we found creative people are very playful. So they really are able to also laugh at themselves. Um, you know, uh, you often find that profound narcissists. That's what I like calling them. Not clinical, but profound narcissists. They're very bad at laughing at their mistakes. They're not really good at that. Creative people kind of take things. And I'm going to fold in one in under playfulness, and that's trial and error. They're very good at just constantly failing and trying things and getting back up. And they have this sort of way of being about them, though, that they don't view it as failure. They just view it as part of the creative process. And also the mantra. I'm folding lots of things into one here, but Picasso said, I often don't know where I'm going till I get there. And that's really the motto of creative people is they're okay with letting things emerge and they're okay with uncertainty. Yeah. So I just added a lot of things. Sorry.
It's, I mean, whatever. This is an academia, Scott, so you can cheat as much as you like.
Thank you.
It's-
Thank you.
Yes, this is fantastic, and folks are
Thanks for
loving the
permission. Yeah.
folks are loving the conversation, and we're so glad to welcome our terrific friends in from around the world. I'm Dorie Clark. This is Better, our weekly Newsweek interview show. We're here with Dr. Scott Barry Kaufman. If you're enjoying the conversation, hit the like and share button so that your friends and colleagues can benefit from Scott's insights as well. We want to say hi to folks tuning in. We have a LinkedIn friend from New Jersey, Steven's here, and Annette's in Southern California. Bless is here. Rebecca's in San Francisco. Alexander is here from Sao Paulo. Trish in London. We have Aisha from KSA. I actually don't know where that is, but it sounds very cool, kind of like a rap group. We have Patricia from Albany. Christina's in Toronto. Hannah's also in Toronto. You should be friends. And Eleanor in Bergen, Norway. And speaking of creativity, one of my musical theater collaborators, Shoshana Shattenkirk, has just moved to Bergen, Norway. So watch for some great musicals in Norway.
Love that. I actually majored in opera in college, and I really wanted to do musical theater. That's really what I wanted to do.
We should totally talk shop about that. And I hear you're a cello guy as well, eh?
Oh, I love cello. I just absolutely love cello. And I may be having Yo-Yo Ma on my podcast soon, so look out for that. Yeah, I'm really excited about that potential.
That's amazing. Yes, for folks who are interested, Scott has a podcast, a very popular one called the Psychology Podcast.
Yeah.
So way to claim that brand name. That's
called
amazing.
the podcast.
So go to scottbarrykaufman.com. You can find out more about his work. And some great questions, Scott, have come in from our audience. And so I imagine that there's probably a classic answer to this, and then maybe your answer. Although who knows, maybe they overlap. But we'd love to hear it. A LinkedIn user says, "At which stage of life, on average, does someone take on the challenge to self-actualize?" What are your thoughts about this?
That's really wow. What a terrific question. I think that there's never it's never too early or too late it's not like if there was some really precocious high school student, who was like, I'm ready to like start the self-actualization process. I mean, I think that'd be wonderful. To have that mentality that it's like I want to be on that journey. And it's definitely never too late. In my early work, I actually started my popular writing talking about late bloomers. My first article was for Psychology Today. My first article for the public was for Psychology Today called "Confessions of a Late Bloomer," and I profiled a bunch of people who completely changed careers. And when they were, I profiled this one guy who was on Broadway at age like 50, and he just completely changed careers. He never did acting, but he said there are a lot of benefits to starting later in life. He said, first of all, I completely the much smaller pool of 50-year-olds trying to be on Broadway than 20-year-olds, and you bypass all that, and like so. I think with the self-actualization journey, I'm really not a big fan of putting limits on ages with that. Maslow was a little more elitist about that. He said, in my sample, we found no college student was self-actualized. Well, I mean, he was, and he had a little bit of a bone to pick against young people as well when you read his personal diaries, as I did. But I will say that I created a tool. By the way, all my tools are for free on self-actualizationtests.com. I created a self-actualization test that I scientifically validated that any of you can take for free and find out what your main sources of self-actualization are. And I just want to say that we really did not find a correlation with age. And I think that that's really important, So take that, Maslow, my dear friend, with all love. But I think you're wrong, about that, Maslow. So we found a really, really not a very, 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 very weak correlation.
That's really
Also, we
interesting.
found a weak correlation with gender and with ethnicity and with a lot of these kind of, demographics. I really think the point here is that any of us can self-actualize. That's what I'm trying to say.
I love it. That's a very empowering message. And
Thank
Scott,
you.
one of the things when we were chatting beforehand that you were mentioning is that you actually have begun to explore creating something a little bit new that you're calling self-actualization coaching. Can you explain what you mean by that?
Yeah, I'm really excited about this new form of coaching I'm trying to put out into the world. We saw that I felt like there was a lack in the coaching world of emphasis on the main themes of humanistic psychology that have captivated me so much. Things such as integration, wholeness, personal growth as a whole person. What does whole person actualization look like? Um, uh, and so there's all sorts of different kinds of coaching that take one slice of you, right? There's high performance coaching, there's mindset coaching. I mean, I can go down the list of 1,000 different kinds of coaching, but we wanted to really create something based on these foundational philosophy of the humanistic psychologist that had a lot to do with unconditional positive regard and a real human approach to coaching. And we're developing those principles. We're developing a course, a 4 to 6 month course for starting with advanced coaches and branching out to educators, like I said earlier, and managers and healthcare professionals. Yeah.
Ah, that's super interesting. Thank you very much. We're here with Scott Barry Kaufman. This is Dorie Clark with our weekly Newsweek interview show, Better. We want to say hi to some of our amazing friends joining us from around the world. We've got Sandy in Portland, Oregon. We have Gabriel from Mexico. We have Rais, who's joining us. Madeline is in Erfurt, Germany. Mario's in Angola. We have Josias from San Jose dos Campos, Brazil, and Sushma from India, DT from Rochester, Anna from New Hampshire, many, many more. Thanks for joining us. So a great question, Scott, that came in that I think is pretty interesting. I know that you do a lot of work around education. That's a personal passion of
Mhm.
yours. You do a lot of stuff in the K-12 realm. And Sushma wants to know what can be done to instill the practice around transcendence, around self-actualization in schools. How do we think about this? And what are some of the main themes that you really want to drive home around education?
That's probably my biggest passion. That's the passion that when I talk about it, I feel that feeling of tearing up behind the eyes. That's a good indicator that what you're talking about is something that is really well aligned with your soul. Not to get too dramatic, but yeah, I have a vision of a human centered education system. In fact, I have my manifesto on my website. If someone could put the link in there, at scottbarrykaufman.com. There's here, actually, I found it. Could I put it in the chat? I don't know if I could put it in the chat. Maybe someone else could put it in the chat for me.
Yeah, what's the thing after the slash on it?
Well, if you go to scottbarrykaufman.com,
Hmm.
at the top, it's the manifesto tab.
Okay, great. We can make that
Um,
happen.
basically, Louis Vuitton has these exhibits, these like museums, and for like uh, various visionaries that they chose, and they asked me if I would create a piece of artwork, and I don't do art in the traditional way that we think of art. So I said, "Hey, can I write a education manifesto?" and and they loved it, and so that's been on display, and I put that on my
So,
website.
so I just need to probe this.
Yeah,
Louis Vuitton reached out to you, asked you to create art, and you wrote a
yeah,
manifesto for them. This sounds
yeah.
extremely counterintuitive, and I love it very much.
Yeah, yeah, that's the first thing that came to me. I was like, "Can I write a manifesto for a human-centered education system?" And yeah,
And
and that
everyone else is probably just doing an NFT. I mean, good on
yeah,
you,
yeah,
man.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Thank you, thank you. Yeah, and you can see sort of my philosophy for education there. But um, I say each child is profoundly unique. The self-actualization journey of each child is a very sacred one. Um, each child has a higher priority goal than merely doing well in a standardized test. So I make this call: do not rob children of the opportunity to create personal meaning. Do not rob children of the opportunity to explore and be curious about themselves, others, and the knowledge in which they're learning, to create, to move forward, to move toward a desired future goal. Yes, we can get high performance out of children by treating them as machines, but we don't set each child for a lifelong journey of becoming and unfolding who they are destined to become. This does the world no favors. We need a human centered education system that acknowledges the universal needs for safety, security, connection, and mastery, as well as nurtures the unique developmental trajectory of each child and the yearning for transcendence that exists deep within each child. And we need it now, is how I ended it.
We need it now. Absolutely. Thank you very much,
Yeah.
Scott Barry Kaufman. He's the author of a new book called Transcend. Now, Scott, a great question came in from Steven. He wants to know, can you self-actualize kind of, just by doing your thing, or does it have to be a conscious quest towards the purpose and the practice of self-actualization? What do you think?
um, I don't think you have to consciously hold that in your head. I mean, I spent 5 years at University of Pennsylvania running something called the Imagination Institute with Martin Seligman, who's the founder of the field of positive psychology. And one of the things we did is we hosted these imagination retreats where we brought in the world's most imaginative people across 10 to 12 different domains of human endeavor, from like comedy writers to mathematicians to we went to Cambridge physicists, etc., musicians. And something that really struck me is I don't think they in their head were thinking, "Oh, I'm self-actualizing," or they weren't deeply knowledgeable about all the psychology behind it. They were doing it. They were so in love with what they were working on. This is what dovetails nicely with the creativity research of E. Paul Tarrance, where he found that creative people, when they're very, very young, even in elementary school, in a lot of cases, they fell in love with a future image of themselves. And that seems to be the key, is falling in love with a future image of yourself and putting your heart, soul, and mind into making that a reality.
That's amazing. Let's all meditate for a moment on that. Fall in love with a future vision of yourself. I think that's really cool. Thank you very much. This is
Um,
Dorie Clark, Newsweek's Better. We're here with Dr. Scott Barry Kaufman.
Thank you, Dorie. Someone wrote, "Wow, imagination retreats." Well, we actually still have an archive of the website up. I think if you Google the Imagination Institute, that website's still up because you can download all the reports and see the videos from all the imagination retreats, if that's of interest to you. Yeah.
Oh, that's really cool. I think a lot of us would be interested in that. We probably have time, Scott, for one more question, and a great one came in from Nicole, and she wants to know if you're trying to self-actualize, if you're trying to transcend, but maybe there are some kind of blockers or things that are stopping us. What are those things most likely to be? What is it that's getting in the way for a lot of people who might be on this quest? What should we be looking out for?
I often talk about vulnerable narcissism as one of the biggest blockers and inhibitors of self-actualization. I mean, I will say this to anyone who listens to me, because I think that we underestimate the extent to which that really gets in our way from really trying things. So vulnerable narcissism is this kind of narcissism that you're so scared of looking dumb, you're so scared of looking vulnerable, that you create a sort of maybe a tough exterior, or you avoid all things that are growth oriented. You just avoid them. um and uh and it is a form of narcissism, because ultimately, in order to self actualize, you need to get outside yourself. That's why I view it as in the realm of narcissism, and I don't really mean it in like a finger pointing way. I want to show a lot of compassion to this, and that's why I've been thinking lately of changing that term to something like just vulnerable mindset, because like narcissism, it feels clinical, and I just think we all have that within us. We all have a fear of looking fragile. We have a fear um, of feeling shame for having ambition. A lot of people who score high in vulnerable narcissism have a fear of growth, which Maslow called the Jonah complex, based on the biblical story of Jonah, who avoided the God kept saying, "You have this destiny," and Jonah kept evading his destiny, and he was scared of greatness. So I think a lot of
If my
people are.
destiny involved being eaten by a whale, I'd probably be scared of it too, just to say.
That's a really good point. That's a really good point.
I mean, no knock on Jonah here. Like I'm right there with it.
And it is kind of funny because, like, Jonah's like, "Nah, nah, God, I'm good." Like, like it's kind of funny when you think about it. It's God talking, and you're like, you know what? I'm good.
I
Yeah.
know, and it's not just Jonah either. I mean, I went to div school, so I can go on this forever. But I mean, the whole point of like
Mm.
Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane is he's there and he's like, I really don't want to do this. This does not sound like a good idea at all.
Yeah.
So yes, there's the heroic struggle affects all of us.
It really does. It really does. And I think there can be a real fear of growth, a fear of standing out, fear of it's a very vulnerable place, standing out, and you see a lot of people, will have various strategies to manage that. They'll create a lot of like kind of a false humility persona, like, or just whatever they can do to kind of circumvent that. But ultimately, I just think self-actualization is feeling comfortable in your own skin, and owning your goals, desires, and vision for the world, but not stepping on people on the way to it. I think that there's no paradox there. I think you can have high ambitions. You can, um, be darn proud of what you're doing, but also try to help others up, and use your platform in a way that is empowering to all people. I just feel like self-actualization takes seeming contradictions and paradoxes and integrates it all into a great synergy between self and world.
I think that's really well put. We have been here with Dr. Scott Barry Kaufman. He's the author of the book Transcend and many others, and including Wired to Create. And we have been talking about how to self-actualize in your work and in your life. You can learn more about Scott's work at scottbarrykaufman.com. You can get his manifesto there on his website as well. Scott, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, and hopefully it's not one of those creepy manifestos. It's like a good. It's a good. Hopefully, it's one that we can all rally around. I hope.
That's right. He promises not to send any mail bombs. This is not a
Exactly.
Unabomber situation.
Exactly. It's funny. Like you think the word manifesto, but or at least some people might think that. But no, I really appreciate being here, talking to you. I really, really like you, Dorie. I really like you, and I hope we can, just keep up the conversation, and we can finally get you on my podcast someday.
Back at you, my man. I'm gonna be in LA in
Wonderful.
April, so let's make a date.
Love it. Let's do it. Let's put that on the calendar.
Excellent. Thank you all for tuning in. We'll see you next Thursday. Take
Thanks,
care.
everyone.